Columbia is a prestigious college in New York City, and some of their scholars in the history department have made a website on East Asian history. Part of this website is on the Qing Dynasty, and I'm going to run it down for you today. First off, concerning the emperors. The website views Qing China, who was one of the major emperors of the dynasty, as a stabilizer and an expansionist, while describing Qianlong, his grandson, as a conqueror as well as a diversifier. The sheer number of ethnicities in China had now become confusing. Qianlong actually did things, as opposed to what some people view him as basically Jimmy Carter, just lucky to be elected during a good time in their country. He patronized art and learning. He brought greatness to China. There was also mention of Kangxi's son, Yang Zhang, who redid the tax system so the government actually knew how much money it was taking in. The site, in general, is positive and obsequious to everyone and everything, as if the Manchus, the founder of the Qing Dynasty, will storm their urban college and kill them. Concerning the state now. The site brings up the importance of the scholar gentry class and their power, the value of the mandate of heaven for popular support, the difference in conduct of scholar bureaucrats at home and at work, and the escape of a peasant life via the civil service examination. The website also addresses many facets of the state's challenges and successes. It brings up the efficient tax policy set up by Yang Zhang. It says there was a covert system implemented for the local magistrates to communicate with the higher-up bureaucrats. It addresses the large population that the government had to deal with. The site addresses a theme of diversification and hierarchy. Now concerning the economy. China wasn't as we view it today. The merchants weren't scorned for being anti-Confucian, and there was a huge trading network. China wasn't isolated as we might view it now. Trade existed to serve several different markets, and there was a hierarchy of systems that met local, interregional, continental, and intercontinental needs. Again and again, the theme of hierarchy is brought up. Then there's the obligatory things that the site brings up, such as that the sheer number of market places increased, and the GDP increased, and most people were still farmers. It's not the 20th century. Moving on to silver. Because of the silver popularity, taxes were now paid in silver. This is inconvenient for farmers because they have to trade in their grain or rice for silver, and they have to give a cut of their grain to the person who exchanged it. There is now a huge influx of silver, so a metallic currency is used, combining copper and silver. The banks we know today wouldn't exist because of this, because the silver currency was too heavy to carry around for merchants, so they traded in at banks for remittance notes, where they could withdraw silver or copper coins for those notes. Moving on to the capital. Because Beijing was in the north of China, and there was a heavy population in the south, the Grand Canal served as a great connector. It served to bring grain taxes from the south to the north, and it also served just to connect the two economies in general. Misconception rundown. Number one, the government didn't control the economy in its entirety. The market had most of the deciding power, except in the salt monopoly of the government. Number two, there is social mobility. It's not the caste system. Number three, China is involved in the world market. How else would they get silver? Chinese products are very popular in Europe. Porcelain, a highly hierarchical system in which it's made, with many specialized steps in the making of such pottery, is very popular in Europe. Places like Canton were sufficient trading hubs for Brits. They would trade in silver for, say, rice, tea, porcelain. No matter the trading regulations, trade was still going to happen. The website is very concerned with hierarchy, dominant global and inter-period patterns. There is little mention of the average person and how they were affected by the rapid economic expansion outlined by the aforementioned forces. The website is academic and representational, like the European artists that will be addressed in the next topic, Qing art. There were three dominant schools of art during the Qing period: the individualists, who were mostly Ming loyalists expressing their feelings of nostalgia and loss caused by the Ming overhaul. There was the Orthodox school, where the people focused on emulating conservative Chinese art traditions in their work. Then there were the court artists who were concerned with demonstrating the greatness of the Qing through their work. The scholar artist class, who were making these paintings, or works in general, no matter the school, tried to convey their expression through the art. It was not representational, it was expressive. European representational art was popular, however, in the imperial court, but it's not really seen as scholarly, just something to look at. Art isn't etched in stone as we see it today. It's not the Mona Lisa it's not, you can't change it. Art connoisseurs often wrote their commentaries directly on top of the works of art. Art is not a window to the world, to the Qing. It is an artist's rendition of himself or his beliefs using the medium of a scene. European linear perspective is very good for documenting history, but not for seeing the artist the way the artist wanted you to see the world. People like Giuseppe Castiglione helped influence China's documenting history in a representational manner. But the scroll style and the use of multiple vantage points to see what the artist feels was much more useful for the Chinese style of art. Wang Hui, the supervisor of the Southern Inspection Tour Scrolls, when Kang Chi was emperor, the Southern Inspection Tour Scrolls, by the way, were a series of paintings that documented Kang Chi's journey through China and what he saw there. He used the traditional Chinese style that was often exaggerated and used multiple vantage points so the viewer could, per se, move through the scene. Zhu Yang, the supervisor of Qianlong's Southern Inspection Tour Scrolls, Qianlong, his grandson, decided to emulate his grandfather, was influenced by people like Giuseppe Castiglione, as before mentioned, and attempted to use the linear perspective of European art of the time on a scroll, which rendered more famous landmarks unrecognizable despite them being technically more accurate because they were viewed from an odd angle, even though it's technically correct. The scrolls that used the more realistic linear perspective couldn't capture how the Chinese saw China, while a style that was more expressive for the artist documented China the way the Chinese saw it. The site is in general claiming that Qing art usually followed patterns outlined by the Chinese artists centuries ago, while the second set of tour scrolls still followed a pattern, that of European art. No matter how you slice it, the site is looking for patterns to try to categorize. The Southern Inspection Tour Scrolls were documents of the journeys of Kang Chi and Qianlong in inspecting the southern part of their empire, whether that be looking at the convergence of the the Huai and Yellow rivers, or just checking up on the people in general. These were documents of their journeys. One could argue that these scrolls documenting Kang Chi and later Qianlong's journeys were simply to document the connectivity of the Qing imperial court, but the Southern Inspection Tour Scrolls were not simply attempts to show the people that the emperor cared about them. Whether they were not attempts to reach out to a large population and appease the masses. That is specious. No, they were based on a deep-seated desire to cut off when Zhang He's voyages ended. Kang Chi and later Qianlong wanted to see. They controlled the center of the universe, a land of more people than Brazil today, and they were confined to a cage in the heart of the nation. They knew where the blood went, and they knew that the body worked, but all they did was hear about it. Experience is the key to understanding. Without these scrolls, we would never know that these two emperors were more than eunuch puppets who lived in their sheltered little palace. They wanted to prove their masculinity and tenacity by breathing in China, and so they did. I've seen several screenshots of the Southern Inspection Tour Scrolls. There are comparisons that can be made between Kang Chi scrolls and Qianlong scrolls. The first can be seen in the Jinan to Mount Tai of Kang Chi, in which he went to a mountain to prove his connection to the mandate of heaven, and there is an extremely exaggerated fluidity of the mountains. They're very rolling mountains. It exemplifies the distinctly Chinese multiple vantage point style that allows the viewer to move through the painting as if they are there. In contrast, Qianlong's inspection of the confluence of the Huai and Yellow rivers, assuring that dikes are built there so there's no flooding, which would be a large detriment to the economy, pervades linear perspective and the influence of European styles even in the imperial court. The next two scrolls, the first being Kang Chi's depiction of Wuxi to Suzhou, and the next being Qianlong's entrance to Suzhou along the Grand Canal, establish the Grand Canal as a choke point, connecting southern and northern China. The first depiction again shows exaggerated characteristics. The ridiculously parabolic slope of the mountains and the placidity of the canal are absurdly caricatured, but they convey a sense of how the Chinese see China. The second depiction is that of a body of water that looks like concrete. It is a more correct rendition, but it doesn't feel right. The viewer can feel a sense of connection in Kang Chi scrolls, but the European depictions look flat and detached. Moving on to another source, Jerry Bentley, may he rest in peace, wrote a very compelling textbook along with another author called Traditions and Encounters, and I'm going to analyze part of his chapter on Qing China. According to Jerry Bentley, Qing China was a homeland, It had living, breathing people who conformed to Neo-Confucian values and were hugely patriarchal and bound women's feet. The Qing people shaped China and the future of China by giving birth and working for entrepreneurs for wages and disregarding anti-trade law. Qing China was a fluid place, more than the several thousand who oversaw the governments of the nation. China was and is the Chinese people. It was a land, yes, expanded and organized by the few, but it was lived by the millions who lived there. Contrasting the two sources I've outlined here today, the Columbia website and Jerry Bentley's textbook, Bentley's explaining that Qing China was a place that, yes, was governed by great men. It had artsy emperors and brutal founders, but above those stories are the millions upon millions of tales of local famine and prejudice, and the infinite number of hours it took to cultivate rice and trade it in for silver so families could pay their taxes. Yes, history can be told by great men, as it is done by the website, which spends 3/5 of the pages discussing the Qing emperors alone. Without their work, China wasn't and wouldn't be the place it was and is. But what would their work matter without a people to govern, without a populace to live and die? In this way, Qing China is a lot like the USA today. They were both founded because of epic wars. They both were ruled by a great few who were often viewed as godlike, and they were both lived by the people. China valued collectivism, and the USA values individualism. But, unfortunately, their stories are often told the same way, as the products of great men who did great things. Yes, the USA sets up trade embargoes that fail and has a palpable currency that can be traded for something that isn't palpable currency. The USA had a treasury backed by silver and expanded its territory. No matter what happened in our pasts, and no matter how many times the residents tore the nation and soldiers fight in faraway lands, the individual is credited with what happens all too often. The Iraqi war is often told under the context of mistakes by Bush, and not by the plight of the Iraqis nor the homesick soldiers. No matter if you're in Qing China or in my living room, you'll hear the stories of great people who did great things, but not the people around them. The people who they affected or who affected them. The world's a place with people in it, and whether their stories are told or not, they still have stories.